Dismantled a portion of a closet ceiling and removed a folded set of clothes and a briefcase. Then rifled through the contents to produce a Belgian passport and an electric razor from a duty-free shop in Hamburg. Shaving and donning a cutting-edge black suit, then seizing a gym bag, he showed me along the street for blocks, arriving at the desk of an executive gym on the 10th floor of a luxe high-rise hotel. We were passed into the lockers by the thin receptionist. She was a Celtic in post-punk swept-back black hair and mauve singlet over her small high breasts. Her lipstick was a fashionable Laurent Rouge Pure Couture. She had eyes of lustrous heights, as if they had seen everything, as if they had been taken by the sky. We proceeded into a lengthy, serious workout, I with a prison calisthenic routine made for cramped cages, Crimson into heavy aerobic strides on a precipitously inclined treadmill, both ending with floor sets, slow yoga, and a steam. Barely visible in the clouds, Crimson outlined the Washington rules. You are in the setting of my choice, not yours, so there is minimal fear of surveillance. No devices, no recorder taped to skin or agents behind these walls. Your young revolutionary today must adapt to each decade's technology. The basic rules are old spycraft applied to modern threats, evolved from the code of the Peloponnesians, the writings of Machiavelli, from the Staatspolizei, the Cheka, from the NKVD, the MI6. Tell me, a mnemonic is ABC for automation, behavior, containment. Too briefly summarized, first we consider automation. Cameras are everywhere. Cars and digital devices are locatable. All electronic footprints are retrievable. Second is behavior. Be forgettable. Act normally. Move between identities easily. Change lifestyles only operationally. The last is containment. Almost everyone talks. Pillows are not for secrets. Only ignorance is invincible to inquisitors. And of personal habits? Work closely only with those known for more than 10 years. Exercise daily. No drug use other than the rare sacrament, for all is too serious for indulgence. We avoid even caffeine, rather than whipping our senses daily. Embrace deep yoga. Meditate with every moment, every step like breathing. And of your security routines? Each morning religiously ask, what if they came now? Then carefully examine all notes, computer files, discard numbers, receipts, anything that leads to sensitive individuals or locations or those that know them. Once each week, do Security Day. Sever or create a relationship, drop negative habits, switch locations, review rules, constantly assume the opposition on the periphery. Study, investigate probes at the edges of things, people arrested, surveillance, odd statements by desk clerks, anything suggestive of hostile forces, so our loving matrix doesn't unravel into the unforgiving world where people die in small street enclosures. We sat in silence, then showered, toweled, and dressed. We passed the girl at the desk, who only nodded. She was strikingly lean in her tight leather pants and heels, dreaming of her nights dancing among blasted Goth tribes in the artist's Soma district. In the noon crowds, Crimson revealed her background. We watch her, as we do selected persons, for we might approach her one day, asking for some small and harmless but critical service. Crimson described the girl as first appearing one sunrise on the empty streets, careening about joyously with her boyfriend, obviously survivors of a psychedelic night. Confronting me suddenly before walking away, she said, "We're not high on drugs or anything." The girl dismissed Crimson as some conservative businessman, ignoring of her revelations, disapproving of her gleaming morning. A pavement artist, once skilled in tracking by foot, located her crash pad and found her a safer job, anonymously. She doesn't remember our encounter, and will never be reminded. How many people do you provide for or develop? There are hundreds, perhaps thousands, monitored indirectly by the six. Within a small hierarchical cartel of devotional equality, each may be called upon for some small event, but unknowing of the reasons. Although shared consciousness is an ancient tribe in spirit, the small operational side beyond the six is structured in cells no one aware of the others. They are all ages, all walks of life, except for Vermillion's bonbonnière of erotic models, which are forever young. You mentioned the tantric practices of Vermilion and his counter-surveillance. Would he include this girl? Perhaps if she possessed a certain irresistible animal magnetism and the refined intelligence of a chess master. But our sexuality is varied. Two are practitioners of high monogamy throughout their lives, faithful only to one person, as am I. Another is non-sexual, anhedonic, Apollonian. One conducts serial monogamy. Vermilion is both tantric and Dionysian. But how would each employ her? If she were a skilled hacker, Cobalt might request that she breach security for a database. If she could trail a coat in spycraft terms, she may be asked to walk naked by the fires at Burning Man and engage someone we wish to study. If she were a graduate student in pharmacology or policy, indigo or magenta could involve her through multiple cutouts. For now, she sees all staff and guests at this hotel, quite close to City Hall and the Federal Building. I did not pursue this subject. Crimson led the way as we walked along the boutique district, its restaurants and bars filled with young professionals confident they had it made. He pointed out the clusters of cocaine users, those monologuing hyperkinetically between bouts of craving and begging more lines. I think of the Berlin epidemic of 1930, he said, where men and women sold garments from their backs for just moments of unbridled lust. Now, as then, they made a Faustian bargain of exorbitant payments for what is, as the final joke, free for everyone, and heavily available among those conducting the erotic rites. Vermilion will speak of such worship. Do psychedelics displace addictive drug use? From the earliest days, our hopes included prevention of the great infections. By these means, we tried to inoculate against the poisons of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and alcohol, providing users and addicts with insight into their psychic vampires, if you will, that drain their life force. Sadly, they substitute a ridiculous power for all rewards. They forget the power of normal orgasms. Indeed, all human pleasures, the laughter of children, racing clouds at the edges of storms, the ennobling dignity of kind acts, the triumphant bliss of natural mind. We took a cab to Golden Gate Park for the afternoon, watching young families and cyclists about the meadows. Beyond the half-moon bridge, by a formal Zen garden and pond of white carp, we snipped herbal teas at the Japanese tea house. How is money regarded? I inquired. A salient economic detail in any study involving Harvard, one that would exclude the divinities of our fireside, the unwritable subtleties of mind. Money is a byproduct of synthesis. It cannot be avoided, and to it we are neither attracted nor repelled. It is merely paper, a convenience for food, shelter, movement, the intricacies of identities, and security apparatus. Drug traffickers similarly focus on profit, growing mad with greed. The psychedelic synthesis, with its chronic exposure to substance, quickly eliminates those who hope to sate such hunger. One stands beside a furnace of consciousness, as if it were an ark of the covenant, where silver and gold are vaporized instantly, and there is neither surplus nor lack. I thought the Rhine maidens were stolen rivers, where stolen river gold was made into the ring, and desired to possess it led Gutamenrung, the end of the world. A gold louis betrayed Louis XVI, fleeing near Varennes, Crimson remarked. Even the sensitive always reading me. To these pronouncements I hardly could reply. Crimson continued in his ruminations, finally speaking in an aside. Others of the six may comment on the paper. Profit is misconception of the inexperienced, but to us a distraction from duty. We prefer not to trade our soul for the whole world, but rather admire the words of Epictetus in his contempt for gold. Epictetus. we live briefly in mansions and hovels, which have the same flies. It is only love itself that is sought, which cannot be bought or sold. In its presence, a tin-roofed shack becomes a palace. In his absence, the glory of kings is but a beggar's tatters. We walked along the city trails in the park of the ocean. Dusk loomed, then swallowed the sunset. The city curved away from the frail golden light of the Pacific. The sea was brilliant, curling and flexing, then moody, awaiting in wonder the first constellations. In the early evening, we hailed a taxi and arrived in the Mission near 16th Street, where we chanced upon a cluster of illegal immigrants on a street corner. Crimson approached with fluent and familiar salutations in Spanish, quickly retrieving several vials of crack and giving them a thick packet of phone cards. We were moved together down an alley, where he smashed the vials underfoot. The cards will be used to call narcotics vendors from Mexico to Colombia, confusing any software aggregates, aggregating names and numbers, and generating schools of red herrings for hostile analysts. His was a basic sanity, full of practical wisdom. He had a perfect aplomb, his every confidence delivered with the prudence of a seminarian. But when he crushed the vials, I thought he muttered violent epithets. They seemed to be Latin phrases, as in some rite. I recognized only the name of Lucifer. We straggled during our long walk to the warehouse district, finally arriving at the cheapest of Laotian restaurants, haphazard with Montagnard weavings. We were restored with a simple meal of vegetables and rice. Crimson exchanged a bow to the owner, and made his small daughter giggle incessantly, with comments in Hmong. I noticed she had a blue ribbon in her hair, and that Crimson placed his chopsticks reverently, as though it were some subtle practice. The evening fell upon us like the neon cool of subterranean blues. We entered the pounding Folsom venues, their entries plastered with club posters under black light, where mobs of mohawked, pierced youth and funerally black goths danced in broken-loined rhythms. Sonic walls of electronic dance music were visceral with techno, drum and bass, trance, jungle, emo, and math rock. Couples lay devastated across the lush pink cushions, chilling in tranquil ambient lounges, while below, masked dancers linked arms like the telepathic future celebrants in Clark's Childhood's End, who moved in serpentine swarms of religious ecstasies across the planet. We mingled with separate groups and danced until exhaustion, clothes clinging, and the last shred of inhibition blown away. Powerful electromagnetic pulses from massive dynamos electrifying the city were transmuted by musicians' fingertips and holy concentration into the primal rhythms of epochs before speech and fire. In the ambient rooms, Crimson slowly moved among the subdued and transformed a ministering spirit, conferring blessings, speaking softly in his gentle way, like a physician among the newly born. Those who could speak returned earnest words of innate trust, their faces open to him, their eyes like pools of night, reflecting fields of stars. At 4:30 a.m., as if synchronous with the previous dawn, we departed the club and walked for blocks, finally sitting on an isolated sidewalk, with Crimson resting peacefully against the cement wall of an undistinguished building. I knelt beside him, drained and mute after the comédie humaine of intersecting tribes and electric youth, their revelry like the frantic joy of immortals. On the edge of vision, the Folsom bus groaned and slid diagonally down an anonymous alley, its fluorescent glare exposing elderly Mexican and Filipino women in shawls, punks swinging crazily from chrome poles, and unconscious drunks crashed along plastic seats. Like security at the price of loneliness, a foghorn sounded its wet lips. A faint Pacific breeze began to move eastward across our hot faces. Crimson awakened me from a reverie, tapping the wall behind him thrice, slowly and sharply, then spoke. One last warning, a counterpoint to our night's vulnerable ecstasies. This 6-story building with no markings is 611 Folsom. On the 5th floor is the northern telecom switch for much of the internet and phone traffic from the Western Hemisphere. Zettabytes of information from undersea cables converge here, all monitored by an official splitter reflecting content to the NSA. There are many such sensitive compartmentalized facilities. He had seen an adversary, that of liberty constrained. Crimson was a study in religious devotion. His words were hushed, and before a great battle, imagining a world in fetters. A chromatic scale, like membranes of light, lit up the edge of sky. All information, every keystroke, movement, conversation, is analyzed for terroristic intent. The scrutiny will evolve to ever-lessening crimes, minor infractions, pre-crime analysis. Ultimately, behavioral and thought-control technologies will influence every individual. Magenta and Cobalt will address these issues, and the end of revolution. At that cold prescience he stood, taking my hand warmly in both of his. He wished me at length safety and peace. Until another space and time, he concluded happily. And where do you go now? I ventured with bravado, holding for precious seconds. I must make breakfast for my children, he said, and see them off to school. I thought then it was some cryptic parting. As a magician behind the silk robe of the lessening night, he was gone. Folsom Street was empty, but for grinding sanitation trucks. Wary, I slid down the wall, legs askew, as light crept down the tips of old warehouses under a dusty flash of blue sky. My flight to Cambridge and the rigors of Harvard was due in only 2 hours. Half awake, I recalled how I had begun this study of 6 chemists and their international trafficking organization, and how I had arrived at Harvard. I nodded for a while, dreaming off other walls, some of metals smeared with blood, some fragrant with jasmine and roses, caressed by soft bells. Chapter 2, Beginner's Mind.